Hey everyone, welcome back to the vlog. This is a response to Matthew Oliver's question about Australia and whether it's a better place to live. I've been racking my brains over this question for the past couple of weeks, and I don't know how many videos I've recorded about the subject, but I'm, I guess a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to answering this question, because it's a pretty involved kind of question, you know, and obviously there's a lot of stuff I've been wanting to say. You have to excuse me, I've got a bit of a cold, so I'm just drinking tea while I record this. Yeah, so honestly, for me now, having lived in two countries, both England and Australia, for me, England wins. And for a lot of reasons, really. But it really depends on who you ask, Matthew. Like, some people will say Australia, some people will say England. For me, it's England. I guess my excuse me. I guess my situation is fairly unique because I live in a boat and I'm cruising the canals. So, for me, now in my stage of life, I think Britain's a much better place to live. All that said, you know, I have lived in Manchester for 3 years, but I've lived in Sydney most of my life. I know a lot of people go to Australia to escape the cold, you know, warmer climate and stuff. But you've got to remember, a lot of people from Australia come over here mainly to work, because the career opportunities over here far exceed those in Australia or a place like New Zealand. And that's where my partner's from, New Zealand. So you remember, you know, a huge economy over here, you know, and also Europe at your doorstep. So the career opportunities, yeah, huge over here. I guess, you know, yeah, like I said, for me, like I'm adapted to the climate now, so I'm acclimatized, mostly. I haven't really done a winter on the boat yet, like a proper winter. You know, it's cold at the moment. It's, what is it, -1.5 at the moment outside. But it's nice and toasty warm inside. It's like 19 degrees, so yeah. I think, yeah, look, it really depends on who you ask on that, Matthew. One of my best friends, Jerry, he's a horticulturalist, did his training at Kew Gardens, and then emigrated to Perth in the mid-90s, and then since moved from there to Sydney. And that's where we met. And then he moved from Sydney to Brisbane, bought a house, and converted it into Brisbane's first sustainable house. As a side note, my best mate's name is Jerry Coleby-Williams. That's C-O-L-E-B-Y-Williams, and he's a bit of a celebrity gardener. And when you go and check out his house and garden, it's easy to see why. Fascinating garden, out of this world, really. Do check him out if you're into permaculture and horticulture and gardening and sustainability and all that kind of stuff. You know, his house has got solar panels on the roof and water waste treatment plant underneath, and yeah, amazing garden. Anyway, so do check him out, you know. But so for Jerry's purposes, living in a warmer climate is better for him for food production, growing plants and that sort of thing. My best mate Rick now lives in Townsville. I don't think Rick would come over to Britain and live with me over here, even if I paid him to do so, because he just doesn't do the cold. So for him, a warmer climate suits him better. He just doesn't do the cold. But for me, like, you know, I love the travel and I love the history and the heritage over here. You know, it's we don't have anything like the canals back in Australia, you know. So for me, I love being in my little boat. I love cruising around the canals. I love the history. I love the heritage. But it's not just the industrial heritage either. It's, you know, the Roman history and every bit of history right up to the present day. Even things like the Hack Green nuclear facility on the Shropshire Union Canal, which dates back to World War II. You know, it was used, well, potentially for the Cold War. It was used again for the Falklands. So that kind of history I absolutely love. So for me, yeah, England's a much better place to live. In terms of cost of living, like, okay, so I've lived in Manchester. So living in Manchester is probably very different to living in London. But Sydney is very much like London. So, especially in terms of cost of living. And a lot of people say, well, you know, don't you get paid more in Australia? I'm like, yeah, well, you do, but it's all relative, you know. You might get paid more, but cost of living's higher. So, I mean, for, say, Sydney, you'd be lucky to pick up a house now for less than $1 million. Whereas in Manchester, for example, you know, $1 million or £500,000 goes a long way. You know, I've seen terraces, you know, even semis and stuff go for, you know, a couple £100,000 and less, you know. Cost of living, I do think the value for the pound is a lot better than the equivalent in Australian dollars. Your basics and things like milk and bread and internet access, things like that, I think you get better value over here than what you do over there. Another example is health. So just prior to me coming over to England, I was due to get 2 root canal treatments done and porcelain crowns fitted. But the bill was like $6,000, and that was on top of my Medicare levy and my private health insurance. You know, it didn't include major dental. So I kind of put up with the pain, really, because I'd heard that over here it's a lot cheaper, and it was. It was £230 for the entire lot, you know, for all the treatment and 2 gold crowns. So, you know, so that's one example, a classic example of where, you know, you might think a country's better. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the idea that they go over there for a holiday, and beautiful beaches and the weather's better and all that kind of thing. But then you look at, you know, the actual reality of living in a different country, you know, and, you know, the example about my teeth is a classic one, because obviously over there it's a lot more expensive than what it is over here. So yeah, I mean, it really depends on who you ask on that. Everyone's got their own opinion, but for me now, England's home. Much better place to live because of the, you know, what I like about it. Like I said, you know, living on the boat, cruising around the canals, all the history and stuff, you know. So for me, yeah, and also cost of living as well, especially for basics like milk and bread, much cheaper. But there you go. There's a few ideas for you. If you want to go to Australia for a holiday, I'd say go. It's a fantastic place to visit. But if you're considering living there, perhaps maybe speak to some locals, depending on where you want to live. I mean, another thing about, you know, the climate, for example, is the humidity. So in Sydney and all up the East Coast, it gets really humid. And it used to piss me off because, you know, back then I would go to work in my suit and stuff, and we didn't have air conditioning on trains or buses back then either. So I'd get to work, I'd be drenched in sweat, you know. So, you know, you think it might be better over there, to, you know, the place to live, but, you know, you've got to take into consideration all these sorts of things. For me, I love being toasty warm in my little boat, or even when I was living in a house, and if I just wanted some fresh air, all I have to do is duck outside or open a window, you know. So, and of course, you know, over there we have things like bushfires, which aren't uncommon. We've had bushfires every other year, you know, in Australia. This is just the worst I've seen it. But we also have deadly animals over there too. I've got a couple of spiders living on my boat, but I met people who can't stand the sight of a spider. But of course the spiders over here are harmless, whereas over in Australia, it's not uncommon to find redback spiders, funnel web spiders. You know, we've got sharks and crocodiles and all sorts of stuff over there that are all deadly, you know. So again, I think it's a matter of who you ask, but for me, England's the winner. Yeah, so look, I hope that's answered a few of your questions. If you've got any more, or anyone else has got any comments about that, please don't hesitate to sing up below, and be more than happy to answer them for you. But yeah, that's it for me. It's over and out. I'm going back to my tea, and then I'm going back to bed. See ya.